Right, thanks everybody for joining us so far. I think we'll kick off just over the starting point. So for those who don't know me already, I'm Alex Booth. I'm the Business Development Manager here at Climber. Today's session, we're going to explore how organisations can move beyond traditional analytics and unlock a new level of intelligence using the AI offerings from Qlik. Apologies if my Teams is pinging away there and you can hear it, sorry. The session today will run for around 50 minutes. There's a few housekeeping notes just before we kick off. Everyone has joined us on mute so far. Please do submit questions in the Q&A panel or the chat. They're both monitored, so we'll be able to pick those up throughout the session. There will be a Q&A at the end as well, so if you don't want to interrupt, that's fine. Please feel free to sort of submit those questions towards the end. Today's session is being recorded, so we will be able to share the recording out, and any links and things like that we discuss, that'll all be shared in a follow-up email after the session. So just a quick agenda of what we're going to cover, and then I'll hand over and we'll crack on with the sessions. So we're going to talk around sort of why organizations are moving to Qlik Cloud and some of the latest features that are available in Qlik Cloud, which is sort of around the AI-driven decision making. Things around Qlik's GenAI capabilities with Qlik Answers, that's where we'll start. And then we'll also talk about how to use Qlik Predict, building predictive models and other things that are in that sort of area of that particular tool set. So if you could just go to the next slide for me, Roger. Perfect, thank you. So just a super quick introduction to who Climber are. Hopefully most of you on here know who we are already, but Climber is a full end-to-end data integration analytics consultancy. We were founded in Sweden in 2007. We have reach across Europe with 4 offices in 4 countries. As a group, we are around 100 in headcount, and that is growing. We have 400 customers in different industries: finance, manufacturing. There's pretty much any industry you can think of, we've probably got some experience in that capacity. We have a managed service desk of what's called expert services team, which is like a dedicated support team with SLAs and escalation processes. We offer training through what we call the Climber Academy. We have quarterly training where we run sort of introduction to Qlik training, and then there's a few new additions to the Climber Academy, so that is evolving. So I'll cover some of those new sessions at the end of today's session. As a group, I mean, it's always a funny one, this when I sort of talk about it, but we've got around 700 years collectively as a group in terms of experience in Qlik and data analytics projects. And we create around sort of 500 different analytical solutions per year for our customers. If you could go over to the next slide, please, Roger. And so just a super quick introduction of who's joining us today. So we've got Roger, who is the BI manager at Climber, specializing in all things Qlik, migration, cloud strategy, and he'll be focusing today on a session and a demo around Qlik Answers. And then Scott Wilkinson, who is a solution architect at Qlik. He will walk through the latest capabilities around Qlik Predict and go through what that sort of entails and a demo on Predict. So I think that's enough for me for now. I will pick up at the end, but I'll hand over to Roger to kick us off. Thank you.
Brilliant. Many thanks, Alex. Yeah, so this session of mine is around Qlik Answers. So what is Qlik Answers? Qlik Answers is a analytical capability, or a sort of RAG analysis tool, which is designed to capture data around your unstructured data. So it's something like about 80 to 90% of a company's data is typically held in PDFs, in Excel documents and Word documents, and it's only about 10 to 20% that's actually in some form of structured database. So you've got a vast array of data which is currently hidden from any form of easy access to enable your business users to gain insights into information from those different data sources. You know, for instance, there will be a lot of information within human resources around individuals, around policies, around all those sort of attributes of information that's appropriate to managing human resources. Likewise in marketing, in terms of web campaigns, in terms of content and research, all of that tends to be in various PowerPoints or various pieces of, say, of unstructured data, which is just invisible to the majority of the workforce, or scattered across SharePoint in a way where it's very difficult to find and get answers to. So really, Qlik Answers is providing that trusted view of that unstructured data into a single chatbot. So in essence, you have a knowledge base that you build around all those different documents, and then that knowledge base is then fed into an assistant, which is then used to answer the questions from each of the different users. So what does that actually mean? So in terms of the componentry within Qlik Answers, this is the knowledge base where you can connect data across a number of different source connections. So from various cloud service, cloud data storages such as Amazon, Azure, Dropbox, SharePoint, FTP. So you can connect to the documents where they reside, which I'll talk a little bit more about a bit later, which is actually quite important. Likewise, you can connect to the data that's actually up on Qlik Cloud, so you can upload that data into the catalog and have it directly stored within Qlik Cloud, and then consume that data into a knowledge base. So what is a knowledge base? So a knowledge base is effectively a graph database which takes chunks of data, in other words, sections of data out of each of those different documents, and converts them into what's called embeddings. And this is all built around the large language model capabilities that you may have heard of around likes of ChatGPT and et al. And what it does, it breaks down that knowledge into searchable components. And then when you apply a question to that, that is also embedded, and then it finds effectively associated information based on those different embeddings, and then creates an answer based on what is found in that search. So it all sounds very, very complex, and it is, but it's made very, very simple for building these knowledge bases up within in Qlik Answers. An assistant can have multiple knowledge bases, so you can actually bring in data from lots of different areas of the business and present those to different users. The security around access to each of those knowledge bases and also to the assistant is all built into the Qlik Cloud security model. So if you granted access to the space containing the assistant, but you don't have access to the space containing the knowledge base, you can't see that knowledge base even if it's linked to that assistant. So you've got this ability now to have an assistant which could associate lots of different knowledge bases across your business, but based on the security rules that are set up around that user, you can only see what the information that you're allowed to see, which is again very, very powerful, where you could through a single security model now across your analytics space as well as your Qlik Answer space, as in your Qlik Predict space, you'll hear later from Scott. You have a single security set of rules that will control access, so you can be sure that you maintain the right levels of security. Certainly, if you're going to start bringing in HR data or some financial data, that is very critical. So having that security model in place is important. So the assistants are just like chatbots. So they just sit on top of the knowledge base, very, very lightweight, very easy to set up, and they connect through to those different knowledge bases. So let me just demonstrate what it is rather than talk about it in these block forms. So this is Qlik Cloud. And what I've done, I've just opened it up into the Qlik Answers mini space. So this basically restricts our view of Qlik Cloud to be of the types of assistant and knowledge bases. So these are the two components that makes up an overall knowledge base. And the typical example of this is, in fact, one we actively use within Climate, is to consolidate all of our company handbook and policies. You know, like any business, you have a range of policies in place, and what you want to do is provide a window into that to enable people to ask questions to those knowledge bases. By all means, you could trawl through the 20 different documents and hopefully you'll find that information, but it's so much easier to inquire in the knowledge base. So first of all, let me just open up the knowledge base. There's the company handbooks and policy knowledge base. And what this is doing is going off to SharePoint. And from SharePoint, it's been configured in a way that I'm bringing back all of these different policies. So we've got 128 pages across, I think it was 20 documents, which are all of our different policies. And you can set up rules which determines which spaces, which folders are in SharePoint these data is loaded from. You can set wildcards which restrict it to particular names or particular file extensions, so you can limit what you load into the knowledge base and view. And then once you've identified all of those different files to be added, I was saying about this concept of indexing, then you can index all or index individual files. I won't do that because it's a little bit boring. It lasts about a minute or so per document. It really depends on the size of the document, but it basically reads the textual data out of each of those documents and then chunks them up. In other words, it breaks them down into approximately pages and then creates these embeddings, which it then uses to find the answers from the assistant. So just, these are all the different.
Roger, yeah. We've got a question come through. How does, so the question's basically asking, does that then create an LLM and then providing the answers using the structure of the LLM? So is like the knowledge base basically your own LLM within Qlik?
Incredibly good question. It's not an LLM as such. It is a set of, it's a mini LLM, if you like. It's a mini model that just contains your domain data. So effectively, out of all these different policy documents, it's creating a tiny, it's a minuscule language model, you could call it. That is your domain knowledge, which is then appended to effectively a prompt that goes out to an LLM. So Qlik's got its own access to its own LLM, which then constructs the answer for you. So it's effectively, it's a way of building up the prompt to create a response based on your domain information, which is very, very important, because you could ask questions out into an LLM. And yeah, ChatGPT, for instance, there's many of them, but I tend to, most people understand ChatGPT and its use. It likes to provide an answer, and it will provide an answer that is a close approximation to the prompt you provided. That answer could be totally and utterly wrong, because it's gone away and tried to find information, and this could be something around your business, and of course that hopefully is not out in the open world. And it will come back with a general answer across a number of different businesses that have exposed this type of information, and therefore it wouldn't be specific to your business. So what this does is creates this domain knowledge, which is isolated to be just information about your business or whatever the knowledge is you're putting into the knowledge base, and then constructing an LLM type response based on that domain knowledge. So effectively it takes out the information that's appropriate for the question you raised and then uses the LLM to construct a human readable answer of that information. Hopefully that answered the question. So that's the knowledge base. And then you create an assistant, and it literally is a click of a button to create the assistant, but I've got one prepared already. And I can jump straight to that. And it's, just like any old chatbot. So you can have some conversational starters. So a typical one will be, how do I book a holiday? So I just click on that. It's now going through. So it's taken my question. It's looked at the domain knowledge that it's got out of those handbook PDFs, and then has processed this data for an LLM to give me a nice readable answer to that question. And what I can do is look at the source of that. So this is the original document it came out of, which is the Employees Handbook version 2023. And it then gives us a breakdown of the text that was in the original document, or is in the original document, I should say. So that again is great. You can go through and get to the original data. Now this is on SharePoint, and I just didn't giving it access to be able to download that data. If that data was actually up on Qlik Cloud, or where it could have direct access, then I could actually download the original document. I'll show you that in a moment. So yeah, you can just answer any questions you like. Now, I was saying about what's very, very important around Qlik Answers and trusting the data, trusting the answers you get from Qlik Answers, is that it tries not to hallucinate. You know, you can never 100% guarantee that it won't, but it's more on the end of, it is very, very unlikely to hallucinate, whereas with ChatGPT, it's quite likely to hallucinate depending on the context of the question. So from this is I can ask it a question which I know it's not going to have an answer. Actually, what I can do is say, what is Qlik Predict? And it'll go through our company handbooks. I haven't actually tested this question, so hopefully it won't. Oh, it did find something. It's interesting. But it's not a great answer. There's some information that we do have in our company handbook. Talks about some core systems, but it's not really explaining what Qlik Predict's about. So it's just found some information in one of our policies around disaster recovery and backups, but it not really the answer to the question, the answer of that question I was after. So what I can do now is, if I just come out of this and go back to the mini site, I've got another Qlik platform assistant. And I can ask that about Qlik Predict, and actually already asked this question. Actually, I should have cleared this down, big pun. So when I first run it, so it didn't give a very good answer. It basically, it doesn't mention anything specific about Qlik Predict. So in the document that's in this knowledge base, it didn't provide the necessary information to give me a full answer. Now, what I did do in that, to answer the other question, I didn't clear the history, I'm afraid, sorry about that. So in the assistant now, big button, in the assistant, I can, if I got the right permissions, is add another knowledge base. I was saying about the ability to add knowledge bases into an assistant. So now I can ask questions about the platform and ask questions about Qlik's AI. And then then get a fuller answer about what Qlik Predict's about. So it gives me that capability now of creating a more holistic, more complete assistant for that particular context of assistant. So I can bring in more knowledge bases. Again, if there was security restrictions around one or more of those knowledge bases, I wouldn't, as an individual, be able to get answers from those particular documents. But in this case, we would expect it to be open to everybody. So this gives you some of that, demonstrates some of that flexibility, the ability to grow and expand a knowledge base very, very easily, or an assistant very, very easily. Just conscious of time, just going to have to quickly go through this. So you can create these starter questions here. So that was in that setup where you can just basically set a question, which just seeds the system to make it easier for people to get used to. Actually, what I'll do is I'll go back to our other the company handbook, mainly because there's some information, some questions in there already. So that's our starter questions. These are some settings, so you can personalize it, so you can provide some information around the welcome message and any errors to make it much more company specific. And this is very, very powerful. So this is now looking at the questions that have been asked and find out ones which were disliked. So there, what is the price of cabbage? You know, the question that couldn't get answered, and you could use that to review and see if there's a knowledge base you can bring that information in. Yeah, in this particular instance, it's a silly question, and therefore you wouldn't address it. But there may be information that question that's being asked that didn't get an answer. You can then start understanding what those questions were, and then look at exploring your knowledge base. And likewise, you can see unanswered questions. And and this also goes into the monitoring apps. So there is a Qlik Answers monitoring app. So you get this one is around this knowledge base on its own, using the Qlik Answers report that you can then look at the analysis across all of your Qlik Answers. So in a nutshell, that is Qlik Answers. And this is all part of Qlik's strategy of trying to combine. In fact, at the moment you've got the unstructured world and the structured world in terms of analytics, and as part of Qlik's continuous development in this area, you'll be seeing, and in fact Scott's going to talk a little bit about what's coming up around Qlik Answers. So with that, I will hand over to Scott.
Thanks, Roger. Let me just turn on the camera, and then I think can I just grab the, yeah, you stop sharing, that's fine. So if I can just get a check that everybody can see my screen okay?
That's good.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. So thank you, Roger, thank you, Alex. So just to give you a little bit of background, so I'll just introduce myself. So my name is Scott Wilkinson. I've been at Qlik for about 13.5 years now. I'm a solution architect in the pre-sales team, so I get involved with a lot of customers, understanding their requirements and translating those to really what we can deliver in terms of Qlik capabilities. Specifically, I've got a focus around the AI and machine learning elements on there as well. What I'm going to cover today is I'll cover a little bit of just a very quick positioning piece on machine learning that kind of goes to what Roger was just talking about there, the fact that we've got machine learning, we've got generative AI, and we're now moving towards a world where agentic AI is probably the biggest buzzword in the world, and the thing that most conversations will have in, but it's still very much emerging technology. I'll go on to talk a little bit about how Qlik have approached the whole machine learning space with Qlik Predict, the value proposition, then importantly, how do we actually use that as well? And then a quick glimpse in the future. I'm going to try and pack that into about 15 to 17 minutes or so. Okay, quickly, what is machine learning? So machine learning is really a portfolio. So when people talk, AI is a portfolio. So when people talk about AI, it's always worth qualifying with them, I find. What do they actually mean? What are they looking at? What are they trying to do? What's the use case they've got? And I think if we look at that, I think going from left to right, the predictive AI has now achieved what I call mainstream adoption. So if you look at 50% of all the use cases, there will be around common garden machine learning, which is really mathematics brought to life in software packages. So the ability to predict various things. I'll talk about what Qlik Predict supports and what it doesn't as well. The generative AI, so we've seen an explosion of this in the last 3 years or so, 3 or 4 years. Really, this is more about providing synthesized content. So you've seen Roger very eloquently show what Qlik Answers can do. So that is using generative AI technology, so specifically a mixture of vector databases, as Roger talked about, with the knowledge bases, and also using large language model technologies in a really effective way around what's called retrieval augmented generation. Now, the piece the marketplace is heading towards is very much this idea of agentic AI, which is much more about AI and machine learning, making decisions, and actually being able to take action from within inside of there as well, to give it a little bit more autonomy on there, and also to allow AI to be provided as services that can be consumed by multiple platforms and multiple devices as well. I'm going to focus the next 5 or 7 minutes or so just on machine learning. So what is machine learning? It was interesting. I asked some colleagues this as a little bit of sense of fun. I mentioned I've got a kind of little bit of more of a focus on some of the AI technologies. And it was interesting to see some of my solution architect colleagues to say, well, what do you think machine learning is? And I got a wide variety of actual answers on there. But I've mentioned it before that machine learning is really mathematics. So it's people being able to apply mathematical theories to a set of data to recognize the patterns in there and then start to kind of forward predict what might happen as a result of similar data occurring, which is all well and good. So in terms of, great, what's the value proposition that Qlik have around this? Well, so if we look at this in terms of the value proposition, machine learning itself is a series of packages. And so one of the interesting comments that we have is we always use very similar the sort of packages that we use versus several other solutions, or even things like R and Python, are actually very similar. But what do we bring as a kind of value proposition around that? Now, what we bring as a value proposition around that is we make it much more accessible, much more easier to use, and we kind of reduce that bar to entry around the whole kind of machine learning space. But it's interesting because I'll talk about what we do cover and what we don't cover very quickly. But there may well be that we don't cover some of the more complex use cases on there. However, it's a classic 80-20 rule that the 20% of use cases that we do cover with Qlik Predict probably account for 80% of all use cases. But you may still end up with a data robot or an AWS SageMaker or Google ML or something else in there providing capabilities. If we look at it from a user perspective, the end user, it makes it a very accessible, explainable, which is really important, and a very much a guided experience in creating this. I'm going to actually show this really quickly because I think that was really kind of hit home with several customers that I've worked with. For data wranglers, I'm not going to touch on it today, but there's a whole host of tools in the Qlik platform. So that includes things like Dataflow, which does data pipelining without the need for necessarily coding or scripting in Qlik. There's also Table Recipe, which has been released probably about 3.5 months ago, 4 months ago now, which allows you to basically manage a table. Now, a lot of machine learning is about getting the data set right, getting the right features engineered into the data, which sounds really complicated, but it's really creating the things, kind of summarization of the data that might be useful. And the final bit, it's an interesting one, this one, is for data scientists, we can save them several hours of basically busy work or hard work or grind, the boring stuff really. So preparing data sets, scoring algorithms, getting answers back from that. I've shown this tool to data scientists, and initially they're kind of like, well, this is turkeys voting for Christmas, isn't it? You're putting us out of the job. But it's not, because it allows them to focus on the things they really like doing. Building, selecting, and delivering machine learning algorithms without the kind of grind and grudge of bringing data sets together, preparing them, as I say, doing all that kind of getting the data set ready for and putting into a machine learning algorithm, which is not insignificant. And really, when we look at what customers want to get out of this yourselves, so you want to drive revenue growth, you want to boost operational efficiency. So if you can identify where you're going to route inventory, if you can identify things that are going to fail where you might want to do maintenance in advance, these are really kind of key drivers for all of this. And then there's areas around just gaining competitive advantage. But just talking about what does Qlik Predict actually have in it? So it really does 4 things really well. So it'll do binary classifications. So this is classic. Is it going to fail? Is it not? One of the best use cases I've seen for this was for a healthcare organization saying, well, how many people are going to turn up and who's likely to turn up, and can we reach out to those that are unlikely to turn up to see if we can get them to actually attend? Multi-classification, which is, well, do I have gold, silver, bronze customers? Are they early adopters, late adopters, sort of mainstream adopters or laggards? We classify them and put them into a bucket on there. So very much the segmentation area. And the last 2 are variations on a theme, really. Regression forecasting is predicting a number in the future. And then multivariate kind of extends that, because what it looks to do is it looks for the relationships between the variables, or the attributes, if you will, and then allows you to make that prediction much more accurate because it takes into account the relationship. So if you sell more of one thing, likelihood is you'll sell less of something else. So it's about forecasting the kind of overall pattern together, understanding those relationships. Okay, so those are some of the use cases on there. Again, I've covered off some of these things, but probably best that I show this. But Qlik Predict allows us to really just do things that generally take weeks or months and don't really explain themselves or are not easily accessible to normal people, and just makes it much more accessible from there. A couple of things we have introduced, we continue to evolve this. I know I'm going to talk about the roadmap probably more in relation to Qlik Answers very shortly when I get onto that. But just some of the things that we've added in recent time to this is intelligent model optimization. So that training of the model, it will do a whole host of new things. So it'll start to select outliers. It'll start to rule things out. It'll start to do better sampling. It does all of that. Now we've introduced embedded analytics. No great surprise there using Qlik Sense. But the ML ops is the piece I always get asked about. So how are we going to change and refresh data sets? How are we going to put an approval flow in there? How are we going to monitor things like feature drift? All of these have been recent additions to the product that make it much more ML ops ready than it ever was when it was released in its first 6 months or so. So how do we use Qlik Predict? I'm going to use a really quick example of this and just highlight this. So the idea being is that I'm going to look at workforce attrition very, very quickly. And what I'm going to do is look at how do we go from a collective workforce to those that want to leave and those that want to stay, right? Now, if you look at this, you've got to format and structure a really good machine learning question. So a year in the life, the year will start, you'll get to mid-year activities, you'll then get on to budget and organizational planning, then you'll go into peer review cycles, and then at the end of the year, what you find out is the employee either stays or leaves. Now, if you look at this cycle, you've got to think where you can actually identify those that are likely to leave and then determine what corrective action you might want to take on that. So if you slice it up, it comes into decision windows. It's very difficult to try and turn those decisions around at the point of decision. What you want to have is that period of influence on there, and you also want to identify a window for data collection. So any machine learning type question that you do, these are the things that you classically look at. So as I say, you find that specific question, we create a machine learning ready data set, and we iterate from there. Now, what I'm going to do is just quickly jump into an application here and just kind of show you the output of this, and hopefully it won't make me log in again. I think I'm going to get away with it. I am, which is great. So what you'll see from this, let me just make it a little bit smaller on there, just to give it a little bit more view for you, is that what we have on here is we have a prediction turnover, we've got flight risk by department, we've got comparison of flight risk employee relations, we've actually got details down there. I do actually have a HR policy assistant there, and I can also look at prediction drivers. Now this is really important. So what we've done is we've built a machine learning model, and we've used this in one of the two ways that's possible for this. We've loaded some data into Qlik, and then what we've done is sent that off to the machine learning model for it to come back and make a prediction on not only who's likely to leave and what's the confidence risk we've got, which is this flight risk percentage, but also we look at other things as well, such as what are the factors influencing this. So if I select on process, for example, what you'll see down here is I get the kind of drivers of why people are wanting to leave. So positive being the positive influence on them leaving. If I look at somebody who's at flight risk, so let's pick on Ramona York there, you'll see what I get a set of influences for each prediction that we actually make. So it scores that whole piece. Now, the question I want to do, and I always love when I use a second screen, is I'm just going to do that and just go to the catalog a second. I'll just keep that as it is for the moment. But what I want to do is I'm going to quickly show you one of the things that was quite a stunning thing for some customers that we've worked with. I'm going to create a new machine learning experiment. And then what I'm going to do is just call this, I'll just call it Climber webinar. And I've just created my personal space. But the reason for wanting to do this is just the speed at which we can do this. I work with one services organization, and they were looking at this from the point of view, I'm just search on employee, and it should pull back, hopefully, my data set, which is that one. So I'm just going to add a training data set, which is this all employees. But what the services customer did was they'd spent a significant amount of time basically working with a whole host of Google machine learning capabilities. It took them about 6 weeks to get where they wanted to get. And at the end of that 6 weeks, we came in and had a data set which saved quite a bit of time, to be fair, was very helpful for us. But we said, okay, great. Can we show you what we can do with Qlik Predict, AutoML as it was then before it was rebranded? So we got the data set here. This is about 3,000 odd employees for about 60 odd thousand cells, not a huge data set. And down here, this field separated is a yes/no field. So I'm going to say, right, separated. I want to select that. And over here, what you can see is it's told me that it's a binary classification. It's going to run 8 different machine learning algorithms on there and check those. All the features are there. Now, the other thing I do know is if I separate the data, only appears if the person actually leaves. So I'm just going to take that out because I know that's another feature. But if I just click this away now, what this is going to do is, this will do a lot of work for me. I didn't mention it, but for categorical values, it will do what's called encoding. So it will turn those into numbers, which machine learning algorithms prefer, or actually need, as opposed to free text on there. So it'll do that encoding for you. It'll do a couple of different types. It'll do one-hot encoding or impact encoding on there. It'll then pre-process all the data. So it'll do the things like hold out some data. It will do things like imputation of nulls. It will do all sorts of things. And just get that data set prepared. This is all the busy work. Then what it'll do is run those data sets. As I said, it'll hold back 20% of that data so it can actually score the model. And then what it'll do is it'll put it through each of these models. It'll train against every model that's there. You can select them down if you want to pick certain ones, because certain ones have certain characteristics. But what you'll see is going through creating a score for me, and it's creating some output. Now, when we got to the end of this, the services company were like, wow, that's the end of that. And I went, what? Well, you've just done in 20 minutes, including us them explaining the data to us, what took us 6 weeks to do and 300 Jupyter notebooks in Python to do. And you can see it scored those, it's run through those, it's given me a recommendation for the best model on balance, score, and speed, the most accurate model, and it's also given me the fastest model as well. So things like GMB is the most accurate model, which I would tend to always go for on there. And you can see it's dropped out some features, so it's dropped out things like the previous period elements. We've got Shapley values, we've got an ROC, and we've also got what's called effectively a curve on there as well. So it's a confusion matrix that's also been put in there as well. So all of that was really quite powerful in terms of what it did. The other piece, just to kind of flip back to this as well, I can click deploy, and then I can make this machine learning algorithm available to people. It will go through an approval process, or it will go to some, another group for approval. But that was a workflow that was very much seen to be asked for, and it will then just provide a machine learning endpoint that can be consumed on Qlik, can also be consumed externally as well if you provide an access token, a bearer token to it. The MLOps cycles there. How do we use this in a Qlik algorithm? Because I'm like Roger, running out of time. We can do manual predictions, so you can have data sets, run them, get the output, which can be the prediction, plus also those Shapley values, which are how much it actually each attribute influences the actual outcome in that individual prediction case. We can do synchronized predictions, so when we refresh data sets and applications, we can send that out to the machine learning model. We can also do real-time predictions, so we can do what-if analysis, and we can use machine learning inside of the algorithm. If any of you have seen me demonstrate machine learning before, what you've seen is use a customer churn example. Can we change the plan they're on? Can we change the base fee? Can we change how many penalties they've got? Various other attributes we can mess around with to try and make their life better. Right, I'm going to take 3 minutes just to quickly go through this, a glimpse at the future. Now, normally I read this out. Bear in mind, anything I say could be wrong, it could change, it's not fixed. This is all future stuff, so just please bear that in mind. Do not make any purchase decisions on the next 3 or 4 minutes that I talk about. These are some of the elements that we have introduced. So Roger's mentioned Qlik Answers, structured, unstructured. I'm going to show you that in a second. I've also got a slide on the discovery agent. We've now released multivariate time series, and there's a few other pieces to come on there. The main bit I wanted to get to was this is how we're going to embrace the whole agentic experience. The embeddable assistant will stay the same, will look like Qlik Answers. We will have a supervisor agent that will then use an unstructured data analytics. The first ones will be the unstructured data agent, which is eventually Qlik Answers now. It will be an analytics agent. It will be a discovery agent. And there is also going to be another one that will help support the creation of answers. We're also embracing things like model control, context protocol, quite a mouthful to say, to allow Qlik to surface agents to external endpoints to use as well. So we're just going into an early adopter program for that. But this is what I really wanted to show, is just this. I'm just going to narrate this. So it's knowledge agent was the other one that was kind of in my head. But this is something put together by one of my colleagues, which is Thomas Gore. And so Thomas put together a very quick demonstration of what this looks like as we go forward with this. So what you'll see here, we're in Qlik, we'll open an application, which is an automobile application. Then what we'll do is just quickly go through that. It's got sales information over a period of years, about 10 years worth, various providers on there. So we want to ask a question, which is how is the business going, which is a very open-ended question. And then also ask if we see any trends in the buying patterns around fuel types for new cars. Now, this is Qlik Answers, but this is Qlik Answers working on structured information. So the Answers agent formulates a plan. The semantic search goes through the applications available to it, finds the most appropriate things, generates again some detail around that, and puts together what it thinks will be an analysis package. It then goes and checks if these charts can actually be created. So it's matching those to the different requirements it had, checks those charts, and then what it's going to do is go through, create some commentary, create those charts, and then what it'll finally do is just hand back to the overall kind of Qlik Answers agent. And what you get is you get quite a structured piece of output on there, which breaks down the 2 questions that were in there, gives us some information on the total net sales, gives us some information about the net sales over time, and also as we kind of scroll down through this as well, will also give us some commentary on the kind of changes and trend types that we actually see on the fuel analysis there as well. I've talked quicker than the video because I know there's only about 8 minutes left in the session, but I just wanted to kind of get through that and be able to hand that back as well. But you can see what it's done is it's picked up some output there. Some of this output may or may not exist. It's gone to actually create these from the various elements that are in there. So I think that's just actually quite a powerful piece as well. So if I just kind of step forward, that's where we're going to. You'll have both structured and unstructured data through the same Qlik Answers interface. The current expectation is to deliver that next year, early next year that is, sorry. And then the discovery agent, which will probably be first half of next year. So those are the elements that we're doing. And if I hand back to you, Roger, if you want to take the screen share from there.
Yeah, cheers, Scott. Thank you very much. So let me just turn the screen back on. Okay. So now the Q&A session. So are there any more questions?
There's no new ones in the panel as yet that I can see. I think there's obviously a couple you've answered already, Roger. Thank you for that, around the difference between a knowledge base and an LLM. There was one question that was asked to me, so somebody who wasn't able to attend. Obviously, I know the multivariate stuff, Scott, I believe is fairly new. That's a new feature. And they were just asking around sort of how large does the data set need to be for that to be a sort of a good driver towards a prediction using time series multivariate data. So I don't know if you could put a little bit of context on that for me, if that's possible.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Alex, because I get this quite a lot, and there's a kind of, if I go back to AI as a portfolio on there, it's interesting the types of things that you're trying to do, because it actually depends on the data quality. Roger and I have talked about this before, and we've worked on joint customers before with this, and the thing that actually drives this is the strength of signal that's actually in the data. So you don't always need huge data sets for this. And where I've come across this in one other example was a customer saying, well, you're going to need millions of records for it to do deep learning on this. And I said, well, it's not actually deep learning that we're doing when we're doing machine learning. As you saw with the data set that I quickly whizzed through there, I think it was about 3,000 and odd rows, and I think there was about 200 and odd people had left in the year, which is not, 7% attrition rate's not unusual. But there was enough signals in there to actually generate a decent quality model and get a good score. In that case, it was the kind of scoring of the model, the F1 composite score was pretty good. It was up in the kind of high 80s, I think it was, which is good out of that kind of score. So with multivariate, you possibly do need a little bit more data than you would do for some of the binary classifications, but it doesn't have to be in the millions. It can be in the thousands generally, and it's a decent data set, and it can even be in the hundreds as long as the signals are quite strong in there as well.
I guess as well, it depends on the frequency of those signals. If it is only going to be like an every 15 minute or half an hour, you're not going to get more because that's how frequent you get in those timestamps, right? So I guess it's also dependent on the source and how frequent you get those. So, okay.
It does, yeah. And that kind of has a knock-on effect to the data volumes in there as well. And what you'd probably find with that is there'd be patterns within the data related to, you'd probably see the kind of classic, if there was a retailer, the morning, the lunchtime, and the evening trade.
Yeah.
I think what you'll find is that the data set is narrower. It's not maybe so many different features. So, it may be more samples, but there's a narrower set of data.
Yeah. Perfect. There's no more in the Q&A at the moment. If there is any questions, obviously, please do feel free to reach out to us if you don't want to answer it in the question panel. If you wouldn't mind just pulling up, there we go, look, it's already on it. So these are some brand new events around the Qlik AI training sessions through the Climber Academy. Now, there are limited seats available on these because these are next week, but we will be sharing the links for these if you did wish to register your interest. If they are full, we will certainly put you down and let you know when the next training will be available. But with all of these things, do register so at least know that you are interested in the sessions. And then if they are full, we can certainly put you to the top for the next ones and let you know the dates that are available. So we will continue to offer free training sessions and enablement resources across a number of different areas within Qlik. So please do keep an eye on your emails and things for those when they come through. And like I say, we will be sending out details on both of these. And then if you could just go to the final slide for me, Roger, if that's possible. There's a lovely mugshot of me. If anyone does wish to book a meeting, you can scan the QR code there on the screen, or by all means drop me an email afterwards, and that'll give you access to my diary to book a follow-up conversation around any of the topics that we've covered today and how we could potentially look at doing either a lightweight POC or just testing out some of this new capability with your data in your own Qlik environment, so you can start to see the value of what's available. But I think we are pretty much bang on time, and if there's nothing else in the chat, then thanks guys for joining me today, and cheers for the session.